Welcome to Jesus Energy. Wow, we're here. We're doing it. First official episode, Jesus Energy. This project is a space where we move beyond simply right beliefs, holding right beliefs beyond actions, and into embodying and emanating the healing, transformative, and loving energy of Jesus. It is dedicated to the ones who want to move into a more experiential dimension of Christianity, for the ones that want to be spiritually curious and expansive, while also rooted into the love of Jesus. It's also dedicated to the ones who might be wondering about their Christianity, like, hey, am I still Christian? I'm not sure, but I'm holding on because of my love for and relationship with Jesus. And it is also dedicated simply to the ones that long to feel alive in their body, live out their purpose, manifest healing and consciousness in this world, and maybe, just maybe, cultivate some more heaven on earth. So what is Jesus energy exactly? What do we mean when we say this? So we are attuned to read energy louder than words, right? We can sense when words, actions, and vibes align, when they emit love and joy and peace and all of those fruits of the Spirit. And we can sense when something is off, when a word or an action might be presenting itself, but the energy behind that, in this case, isn't necessarily aligned with the wisdom and the love and the teachings of Jesus. So, Jesus energy can move in and through the religion of Christianity, and also sometimes it's off. And sometimes the energy of Jesus is outside of those common lines of Christianity, and, sometimes it's not. So this is like, my heart for this is looking and searching and weaving through both Christian and non-Christian spaces, seeking out that energy of Jesus that truly just brings healing and transformation, and the mission that Jesus was here to tell us about. Richard Rohr says that humans respond to one another's infallible energy, as Mary Oliver calls them, much more than to their precise words or actions. I also heard the incomparable, the incredible Barbara Brown Taylor speak on this. When someone is speaking, that we only hear like a small percentage of the words that they're sharing, and much more we are tapping into and resonating with that energy. And for some, the energy behind the words. And for someone that has a history of going over and over in my head words that I have said or words that I want to say, this can be really healing. Focus on that energy. And I think a lot of us can resonate with this, right? Thinking and overthinking what we want to say or what we did say, and instead letting the energy live in our body and help us to be present in the moment and emit the energy that we intend. Richard Rohr goes on to say that beautiful morality even shines forth when someone does an imperfect thing, as almost all actions are, but the energy of the person is filled with love for others. That is Jesus energy, the untouchable something that is behind actions and words, the untouchable energy that is in alignment with the fruits of the Spirit. In addition to that, Jesus' energy is also, when I talk about it, I also really want to touch on this very palpable, this very real and tangible energy that we notice when we remember the presence of Jesus with us, right? So for me, I would love to know when you remember the presence of Jesus with you, what that feels like. Not only just like what you think about what that feels like, but what that feels like in your body, in your bones. For me, I remember this when I am reminded of the good the goodness of being human, and I feel like rooted into my gut and into my being, and kind of like that solar plexus area too. I'm really rooted into my body while also being reminded that there is love more than me, this kind of like tension between the two. Also, I love calling upon Jesus in prayer and asking for like specific guidance and wisdom. And also I'm reminded of Jesus when, I start to get like merged with a really strong emotion or feeling. And then there's that pause. Eckhart Tolle talks about it like how we are not our emotions or aware of being. We are the awareness of our emotions. So in that space, like before we go into awareness and before we're like totally merged with a really intense emotion, like that pause, that space between, I remember Jesus often as like that loving invitation of like, hey, life is over here. Life is that way, Kate. Like, go sit into the seat of your souls and try to look through the eyes of love, through the eyes of God. That space between the merging and the seeing through the eyes of love. So in this space, we will aim to get to the heart of the mission of Christ. We will seek to encounter the healing that is actually impacting our cells, that takes place on a cellular level and works to open up the electromagnetic fields of our hearts. I have heard it said that the electromagnetic field of our heart is 5,000 times stronger than that of our brains. So getting out of just beliefs and thinking thoughts and into letting Jesus impact and open up and protect our heart centers. Another mission of the Jesus Energy Project is to create a safe space to explore things often labeled as not Christian, but yet undoubtedly and palpably are emanating transformation and providing healing and goodness in people's lives. And sometimes those things might be given a bad reputation simply because, they're kind of like a mystery or unknown. I really want to dig into those things. Things like energy healing and mysticism and so many other good things. While also digging deep into the beauty of Christianity. There is still goodness here. There is still healing here. And I want to dive into what that is, all in order to get closer to the heart of the original mission of Jesus, to spread healing and consciousness and to more deeply enjoy our lives. Because this is important to me, because personally I came to a place in my journey, my walk with God, where God just became so expansive and bursted up and out of this box that I had my Creator in. And, from experiencing and receiving energetic healing and learning about angels and manifesting and mysticism and seeing the beauty in all of it. And I was like, wait, if this isn't Christian, I don't know if I am. But fast forward, I do resonate as learning from Christianity and seeking out the wisdom of Christianity. And I love learning from other traditions as well. And I just think that all in all, Jesus is a lot more expansive than he is often given credit for. The Christian of the future, Karl Rahner famously said, the Christian of the future will be a mystic or will not exist. The number of Christians, at least I know of in the United States, has been declining for years and is expected to continue to do so. You can get more specifics on this from pewresearchcenter.org. But we know this, right? There has been this shift in Christianity. There's not only statistics, but we can feel it. We can sense it, right? From a lot of people deconstructing their faith and their beliefs that they grew up with and changing their beliefs. But if the future of Christianity is mysticism, what is a mystic? What is mysticism? Well, the word in and of itself, it doesn't like to be necessarily pinned down by words, but attempting to can be really helpful. My teacher from my spiritual director training, She's absolutely incredible, from Pax Christian Spiritual Formation Center. She defined mysticism as the conscious awareness of God's presence with us. Conscious awareness of God's presence with us. Even just saying that, I start to feel some goosebumps on my forearm and tingling through my body, and just wake up to the remembering of the hovering presence of God here and now, of true life moving through each of us here as we sit here. And mysticism can simply be the awareness, the remembering, the watching of this energy, of this movement, of this flow of life that is God with us. And mysticism over the years has not always been given the best reputation within Christianity, maybe because it's mysterious. I'm not fully sure of that. I want to dive into that too in this podcast and learn why that has been the case. My assumption is that because it's so mysterious, sometimes it can be easier to cast off, to kind of push aside, to be fearful of it because we aren't quite sure what it is. Some have even gone as far as labeling aspects of it as like evil or wrong. And I was so fortunate to have an incredible pastor, spiritual director, good friend, and mentor that first introduced me to mysticism. And when I heard the word, something just lit up in me, and I was like, yes, I need to learn more. I need to dive into that, because that awakens something within my spirit, within my soul, in my being. And I want to follow after that. And with that invitation, that curiosity in mind, my hope and my prayer is that this project can be an extension of what that invitation to mysticism was for me, that incredible mentors did for me. I hope to continue to pass that on, because it has been such an encouraging and inspiring and enlightening gift to me. Okay, so let's back up a little bit. As I think you probably know, a lot of this podcast is going to be dedicated to learning from and hearing from various spiritual teachers and healers. And it felt only fair to first give you the opportunity to also get to know me. And also as a challenge to myself, because I resonate as an Enneagram 4, if you are familiar with the Enneagram, and it can be easier for me sometimes to hide my true essence out of fear of being misunderstood or misinterpreted. And so I want to challenge myself to kind of go out of a limb and risk being misunderstood. I also have a great fear of triggering other people, saying something that might hurt someone's feelings or be taken another way. And so, as you can tell, that even makes me cry, even just thinking about it. But so, I mean, I've been, some of my greatest, people that I really look up to have triggered me. So I don't know why I have such a fear of that, which is interesting. I don't know. I wonder if you do too. And I love when people are bold and just so forthright and honest, like, give me your real opinion, give me how you really think about this. And so it's funny to me that I often will pull back in that regard. So that's another reason why I'm here, challenging myself to do this. And also Mel Robbins, another teacher and speaker, she has said that something that has helped her is this get over perfectionism and having things perfectly calculated and formulated into what she wants to say, letting that go. Something that's helped her let that go and simply to just do her best is this idea that if she speaks or messes up, that can be a great invitation to someone listening to be like, wait, I can do this. Like, I can do that too. Or I could say that better. I can do that better. And so that gives me really great encouragement. Like, this does nothing more than to like completely mess up and stumble and fall over myself, and to give someone else the encouragement of like, hey, I can do that. I can say that in a more articulate or gentle or encouraging way. If this does nothing else than offer that invitation, then hey, that's more than what I could want. So with that said, my intention is to share a little bit of my story with you in hopes of connecting us and getting to know one another. So I grew up going to church. I grew up going to a Lutheran church, and I was actually the first one that I know of in my family that didn't get confirmed. I refused to go to class. I didn't think that I needed a class to prove what was in my heart or in order to take and receive communion. And I say that because the spirit of that little girl, the one that liked to color outside the lines and just be fully taken over as much as possible with the mystery and the wonder of God, is very much with me right now and giving me courage to try something new, and has given me courage as I've explored mysticism. And it's funny how our younger selves can give us the courage to do that. And so that's why I bring that up. And I say that wondering what your younger self might be longing to offer you in your journey of transformation and expansion right now in your life. That said, I think confirmation can be so beautiful. I think religion can offer us so much beauty. And I love aspects of like liturgy and tradition. And there's, I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. There's so much beauty in both. And as I grew up, I made the choice to get baptized in a beautiful experience in a lake in college, and met my husband eventually, and we had 3 babies, and just giving you little, you know, little bits and pieces here. But when I had my babies, they just blew my heart open with this whole new kind of love. And it was the most beautiful and miraculous and raw and vulnerable time of my life. And, my late 20s, early 30s, after moving through 3 pregnancies, my hormones completely shifted and moved through postpartum mood and anxiety disorder. I moved through intense paralyzing anxiety and deep depression, and also started experiencing autoimmune-like symptoms and food allergies. And I'll get into that more later too. But, just moved through a new to me experience in regard to hormones. And, I always resonated with being a very positive and spiritual person. And it was that time of my life where I first felt this deep separation from God. But I'll get into that a little bit more too. But it was around that time that I also started working as a children's ministry leader in our lovely church with incredible pastors who introduced us to beautiful spiritual formation exercises, Examen and Lectio Divina, and beautiful prayer. And we had small groups and friends that became like family and still are. And during that time as a ministry leader, I know it can be common with people that go into ministry, but I think being so up close and personal with seeing the scripture in a new way, I started to also question it in a new way. And it was around that time. So I specifically recall sitting crisscross applesauce. Well, not quite actually. My knees don't really bend that way, but they were sitting crisscross applesauce. I was a little more like side swept version, just comfortable on the floor with these sweet kiddos. I can still see their faces looking back at me. And we started to move through the story of Abraham and Isaac, where he almost sacrifices his son. And the story went something like, faith like Abraham, be like Abraham, do anything God tells you to do. But don't worry, because the end of the story is a foretelling of Jesus to come. And it was like, whoa, I remember just wanting to change the story. I was so just aware of how that could be impacting the way that they saw God. Wait, if they hear this, if they hear a story about God asking Abraham to sacrifice his son, who do they think God is? Who are they going to think God is? How is this going to impact the way that they paint the picture of God? And it was in that moment, it felt like a ton of bricks kind of fell in the room with me, and time stopped, and I knew I needed to dive in deeper to the meaning behind the story. What else could possibly be going on here? And then I started moving through some just deep, as I'm sure a lot of us have, questioning of God and deep anger towards God at all of the pain in the world. And thankfully, in that anger and in that questioning, I was brought to Greg Boyd's book called Cross Vision, which is an exploration of looking at the entire Bible through the lens of the cross. And around that time, also read a lot of Rachel Held Evans' books, as I'm sure a lot of us have. And she also moved through Greg Boyd's book and moved through Jessica Kelly's book called Lord Willing, that moves through. It's a stunning book that moves through the tragic passing of her son, who she lost to cancer, and it explores the role of God in that tragedy. And through this research and exploring, I don't want to rush through it. I mean, it was like, gosh, years and years of exploring and wrestling with God, but through that exploration found God to be truly and fully compassionate, which brings me back to the story of Abraham and Isaac. Greg Boyd talks about this story as, well, how can we look at this through the lens of this cross? And soon enough, the story of Abraham and Isaac sincerely has become one of my top favorite Bible stories. And became less of have faith like Abraham, be loyal and listen to God like he did. No, at least not in the way I thought and originally had interpreted. No, this is most deeply and truly this incredible story telling us, showing us how God can cleanse our own fears of who we think God might be and clear us of our own projections of who we make God out to be. Famous quote, the writer of it is unknown, but the famous quote that says, God made man in his image, and man, being the gentleman that he is, returned the favor. Meaning we can only know God as deeply as we know true compassion, as deeply and as purely as we will seek out love. And this story is most truly and deeply this cleansing of Abraham, this example of how God can purify our fears, our projections, and clear off our heart in a way so that we can more truly and clearly see the source of all light and love. During Abraham's time, sacrifice was common, and tragically, even child sacrifice took place. And so in this story, I'm sure Abraham had these fears of, and he only could know God as much as he knew the gods of his time and the way God was made out to be. And so God said, because I guess he was faithful and he was trying and he was seeking. And then God said, that is not me. An angel of the Lord called down and put a stop to the sacrifice. And that story ended up being this foretelling of Jesus and God saying, here I am and here I am. Ultimately through Jesus, through the reflection and image of Jesus. Hebrews 1:3 says, the Son is the radiance of God's glory and the exact representation of his being. So if something in the Bible does not look like Jesus, we are invited to look again. I have found through this, the Bible, it's just expanded and opened up so much more. There is so much good and gold in it. And the most beautiful thing that I love about it is that it truly is alive and constantly moving and reflecting to us the very condition of our hearts. And it is this incredible collection of stories showing us examples of people purifying their hearts and their idea of who they believe God to be and struggling through who we think God might be, and ultimately saying, here God is, through the image and the wisdom and the love and the example of the pure reflection that is the wisdom and the teachings of Jesus. We can know the accuracy of our understanding of the Bible through the way that it reflects Christ. So in hindsight, a lot of that time for me was a dark night of the soul, and I've studied it. I kind of have an issue with like explaining what things are after I've learned them. I more take them into like my body and being, and then sometimes have a hard time re-articulating it. But I do know that St. John of the Cross has really good writings and explanations on clarifying the dark night of the soul. Oh, I'm getting a little like out of breath here, guys. But this is so fun. Thank you for being here with me. I'm honored. I'm honored. I'm honored. And so some of it was dark night of the soul, kind of this like when before I had always felt God's presence with me despite circumstances. This was kind of this like not experiencing God's presence with me is the best way I can think to explain that. And then also mixed in with it was, some of it was dark night of the soul, some of it was just wrestling and anger with God. And then there was also mental health stuff. And around that time too, as I mentioned, this was about a decade ago, was also this real struggle with my own physical well-being. As I mentioned, I went through really intense hormonal changes, as I know a lot of us have gone through and are continually moving through an extreme adrenal fatigue, which is extremely wildly common, and unexplained autoimmune-like symptoms and horrible abdominal pain and digestion struggles and skin issues. And I went to doctor after doctor trying to figure out what was going on. We couldn't figure out what was going on. Sometimes I would just be like on the floor, bent over in pain, or even just more simply, like I would go out to eat and have something and get so sick and fatigued from it, it would be hard to function for like a week or have horrible brain fog. And so those symptoms, encouraged me, pushed me to find healing experience after healing experience, and finally found some healing for my adrenals and started to feel more awake and alive and myself again. And just experience after experience kept feeling better and better, eventually leading me to introduce an introduction to regenerative health. And honestly, at that time, I thought I was like feeling great and feeling good in my body again. But whoa, if you know regenerative health, like I mean, it woke me up to a whole new level of cleansing and healing and waking up various parts of my body. Like I very specific memories of using certain like herbs and things, and talk with your doctor, not your doctor. So I'm not giving any recommendations here. Certain healing modalities, I would genuinely feel like, actually in particular, like the right side of my brain, I can remember like tingling, waking up, or like my liver and my kidneys, I could feel the healing going to the specific places in my body and waking them up, introducing me to a whole new kind of vitality and feeling more alive in my body. And wow, it is my prayer for everyone to get to experience it. It is so incredibly powerful and beautiful. And along with that, emotions coming up and out of me, coming to the surface and being released, things that I didn't even know were like buried within my being, coming up and out to be healed. And it was also around this time that I was studying to be a practitioner of regenerative health. In that study, or it might have been in a parallel study that I was doing, I'm addicted to taking classes, the work of Byron Katie we moved through. And I bet you love Byron Katie's work too. She's so incredible, right? And if you haven't read it or been introduced to her work, I highly recommend it, especially her book, Loving What Is. And I think it was the second time that I moved through listening to that book. So I'm just warning you, this might get a little trippy because it in fact kind of was. But I remember being woken up to these words. This is the best way I can think to describe it. These words like almost lifting up and off of my body, and I could kind of like a morning dew, like it lifted up and off, like hovering over my body. And it was as if I could like almost see these words or feel these words or maybe just know them in my being. But that we see what we reflect and we reflect what we see. We see what we reflect and we reflect what we see. And what that meant to me, what that showed me was this deeper seeing of more clearly the ways that my internal world was impacting the way I see the external world, and how what I am seeing, either God or my situation or another person, what I'm seeing in them is also giving off this energy, this reflection emanating off of my body. It was simply this waking up to, whoa, like this kind of, I don't know if it was grace or just like this removal, like of another veil in front of my eyes, but like, whoa, I could just all of a sudden see more clearly how my heart, my internal world, was more deeply impacting my external world, like how our hearts can be this giant and very clear projector of how we are experiencing and seeing our world, the ones that we are with and our experiences, as well as God. And this is nothing new, right? People have been saying this forever. You know, Anis Nain, I think that's how you say it. We do not see things as they are. We see them as we are. And Byron Katie, I have yet to meet anyone who is not my teacher. But you know, when something old hits you in a new way and just kind of wakes you up a little bit more and shocks you back to the truth of who we are and why we are here, it was like this veil lifted from my eyes and I could more clearly see my energy field and my thoughts and beliefs stored from within my being, and the way my inner world was deeply impacting the way I take in everything around me. And it was also like this immediate and deeper invitation to participate in creating and cultivating a more pure and light-filled projection from my heart, creating, and with that participate in creating a world that looks more like love, right? And we talk about this a lot with the ones closest to us, right? How the ones closest to us in life can be our greatest mirrors. Our partners, our children, our loved ones, how they can be our greatest mirrors to the innermost depths of our being. And then when we give permission, our entire world can become our mirror. An exchange with someone at a coffee shop can be so telling of the condition of our hearts in that moment. One of my new favorite teachers says what someone says is about them, and our response, our reaction, our feeling is about us. So someone might say something that makes me feel like they are being dismissive or that they are not seeing me for my most true, authentic self. And because all things can be made good through the compassion of God, we can turn this around to say, how am I not letting my truest, authentic self be seen right now? In what area of my life am I not letting my essence shine? In what area of my life, my relationships, my friendships, my passion, my career, am I not letting my most true essence out into the world to be heard? And then as we turn this around, we can then invite the guidance from Jesus as our friend into our healing. Jesus, how can I let my essence shine more into my life right now? How can I enjoy living from my most authentic self? And one way is to practice sitting in the memory of our essence. We can practice being in our essence in the morning, in the evening, or any time throughout the day that works for us. We can practice remembering a time when we felt like our most authentic self and most alive. We can practice remembering that feeling so much so that it moves through our veins and that memory. And in that practicing, we are rewriting neural pathways. And there's so much beautiful science in this. Again, I remember things mostly through like my being and my body. An incredible book on this is Practice the Pause by Caroline Oakes, and how contemplative prayer can help actually rewire our brain. But in this too, also so can remembering our essence. And Jesus spoke on this universal law of reflections too. Why do you see the speck that is in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log that is in your own? And I say this with a very intense awareness that this is not about taking on the crud and heaviness of others. Rather, when I turn to tend to my own emotional reaction and emotions that rise up within me from projections and reflections that I'm seeing, this tending to these emotions, being real and honest about the emotions that rise up from within me, allows us to get out of that fight or flight response when the blood rushes out from our brain and into our limbs in fight or flight, and rather into a state of presence and awareness. And then we can more beautifully and accurately respond from a place of emotional neutrality and true presence, so we can make decisions and discernment that we feel good about, while also healing these tender places that are sparked from within us when we notice triggers and reactions. And I often am resistant to my own reflections, like, okay, true self, that is so not real. But as I take, that's so not true about me. This is about them. But sincerely, there has never been a time where I can't turn something around and look inward to invite healing from my own being. And again, this is not about taking on everybody else's stuff and energy, but rather when I've noticed that when I can more clearly see my own projections, I'm better able to also notice what energy is mine and what is other people's. And my obsession right now is practicing clearing energy and clearing energy that is not mine and reclaiming energy that is mine and connecting more deeply to light. And this is a whole nother tangent that I hope that we can get into, and I hope would excite you too. What I see in someone else or even in God is more clearly and simply a reflection of my own interior world. What I see is more deeply and simply a reflection from the projection of my mirror heart. And this seeing gives this incredible insight into my own creator field. Again, this might sound a little trippy and out there, but our creator field is made up of our thoughts, our beliefs, our emotions, our aura, our electromagnetic field, and sometimes stored memories are in there. This can be vulnerable to share because there was this time when I would have fought this because I think it can perhaps sometimes sound like, oh, we're constantly responsible for everything happening in our world, or spiritual bypassing, or taking blame for all of the bad things that happens when we look at life this way. But that's if that's what it sounds like, then I'm just explaining it wrong, and you can turn this off now, because for me, this was the opposite of spiritual bypassing, and instead this deep invitation to examine my heart and let God open up my heart and let God look at every little thing so that I can more deeply shine light outward into the world. And I bring this up for a couple of reasons. One, because I think a lot of us are having these experiences that feel like a veil has been removed from our eyes, that slowly these scales are falling and we can see life more clearly, that we are being invited into participating more deeply into the creation of our lives, and that we are waking up to remembering what our souls came here to do, or to remember, or to teach, or to learn, or to expand into, and to hopefully align more deeply with the truth that is love, which is at the core of every good thing. I also bring this up because this is my absolute favorite practice that I love diving into on an almost daily basis when I'm not completely exhausted or just want to give up or, throw surrender to. But it is most truly the clearest invitation into aligning with love, and that helps me manifest goodness and participate in creating. And again, I know that it's something that kind of sounds out there, and it is kind of like mysticism, difficult to put words to, but I have this feeling that we're resonating and aligning, and that you get the vibe that I'm trying to put out there. Seeing life in this way has just been so incredibly empowering and encourages me to take radical ownership over my own energy and joy, and has been so uplifting again and again. What I see in others and my world is telling of the condition of my heart, and I am constantly, at every turn, gifted the opportunity to turn inward and ask God to reveal how I can allow source, allow love, and allow my higher self to pour compassion and self-compassion into these spaces in my being in order to see more clearly and for light to move in and through me. Every interaction can be this healing and this blooming. Richard Rohr also says in relation to how we see God, we become the God that we worship. If we see this judgmental person in the sky scolding us for things that we're doing, are we not going to become more like this in the energy of judgment? If we see compassion, will we not know and offer and be compelled? Just inevitably more compassion will fall from our being. The more that we see love, the more we emanate love. And everything that we see can become this beckoning to unveil things that have been stored from within our being and within our body, and it can be a call to be healed. And then the more we get to reflect light and the more we get to see light in others. And I believe, I know this is beyond beliefs, but I have this faith and belief that more that we see light, the more light there will be. St. Teresa of Avila says, we have heaven within ourselves since the Lord of heaven is there. The more we remember God with us and in us, the more it will emanate from our being. What if the more that we practice seeing this and holding this memory from within our body, what if it calls more heaven down amongst us and up from the earth and renews us from within and from within the earth, and then heaven and earth are restored and renewed to heaven here. What if we do have a really big role in making space for Christ to move through us, to be the hands and feet, to make room for the energy of Jesus to move out from our being? What if it does depend on us to bring heaven to earth? I am willing. It depends on our surrender to make space for the energy of Jesus to move through us. What if it does? I am willing to look a fool, to bet my life on trying, and I would be honored to try along with you. And that is my mission in the Jesus Energy Project, and joining alongside you and your incredible work and all of the other incredible practitioners of love that came before us and are here amongst us and will come after us. I hope and pray that this mission will uplift you and inspire you and inspire us to shine our light, our God-given light together. Carl McColman, one of my favorite authors, writes that Jesus proclaimed of himself that he was the light of the world. And he also said, you are the light of the world. I pray that this project helps to make space in our being for light to shine through us, for us to remember the light that is within and to beam and connect that light between us until the earth is restored and heaven is here, heaven amongst us. Amen and amen. At the end of every episode with the guests that we will have on this show, I have been asking them a series of questions that I would love to ask you today. When do you remember God's presence with you from within your body? What does that feel like? What do you sense? How about Jesus? When do you remember Jesus with you? What is that like for you when you notice Jesus from within your being? What does faith mean to you? How do you hear from God? And what are you hearing right now? And lastly, my intention is because I just love healing exercises and I think they're fun and they add goodness and light to life, I intend to end every episode with an invitation to healing. So for today, I'm going to offer 2 suggestions. One, because choosing and deciding and discerning is a great discernment practice. So I've loved trying this. So I'm going to offer 2 suggestions. And if you feel called to one over another, just go with it. And, if neither of them vibe with you, of course, just turn me off right now and it is what it is. Healing exercise number 1. Exhaling. Simple as that. When you might start to feel an intense or a heavy emotion come on, simply press air out from your nose or your mouth. I usually like to do out my mouth because I think there's some research there. But again, sometimes I have a hard time reiterating it, but I remember things more deeply in my body. And that is one way you can really let things out. Or if you're feeling really intense, you can horse breath it out. So again, if you start to feel something come up on you, exhale it out. Push the air out from you. And breath work is incredibly powerful in the way it can shift our cells in our body and our being. And intentionally exhaling before something like stores within our body for the rest of our lives. I'm just kidding, but kind of not. Watch it go out and maybe say a little prayer while you do. Another option would be to, as you inhale, think about the space behind your heart. The backline of the body can be a very vulnerable place, and specifically behind the heart. It can also be a space where we start to lose some length within our spine. So perhaps think about if you're starting to feel vulnerable or like you want to go in an internal or like an imaginary shell, inhale. Think about finding space in the spine and even like in an up and down way and in a right to left way. Inhale, breathe some space and some extension into the ribs in that area and simply find just a little heart light of extra space. Maybe one of those will resonate with you, and my prayer is that it simply brings a little lightness to your week. Thank you so much for being here. You are a gift to the world, and you are uniquely created and gifted to spread light and healing and goodness to this earth. So thank you for being here. Thank you for living and breathing, and all my love and gratitude to you.